I can still feel the chill of that night air seeping through the cracks in my old rig's cab, even now, sitting here in my kitchen with the lights on and the TV murmuring in the background. It's been over 15 years, but some memories don't fade. They burrow in like ticks, sucking at your peace until you're left scratching at shadows. I was 42 back then, a trucker with a decade under my belt, mostly long hauls across flat interstates where the biggest worry was a blowout or a way station. But I'd taken this local gig in West Virginia to be closer to home, hauling lumber from a little mill tucked way back in the hollers of the Monongahela National Forest. The pay was steady, and the drives were supposed to be easy, short loops through the mountains, no overnights in sketchy motels. How wrong I was about that. It was late fall, the kind where the world feels stripped bare. The leaves had mostly fallen, carpeting the ground in a soggy mess of brown and red, and the trees reached up like bony fingers scratching at the gray sky. I'd picked up my load that afternoon from the mill, a full trailer of fresh-cut oak and pine, the scent of sap still strong enough to cut through the diesel fumes. The mill hands were a quiet bunch, older guys with weathered faces and stories they only shared over coffee in the break room. One of them, Old Man Harlan, had clapped me on the shoulder as I climbed into the cab. "Watch them back roads tonight, son," he'd said, his eyes squinting under his ball cap. "Wind's picking up, and things get peculiar after dark." I laughed it off, figured he was just pulling my leg like they do out here. Appalachia runs on tall tales, ghost miners, mothmen, haints in the hollows. I'd heard 'em all around campfires as a kid, but I was a grown man now, with bills to pay and a family waiting back in Elkins. The sun dipped low as I started out, painting the ridges in shades of orange and purple before giving way to night. By the time I hit the Forest Service Road, it was full dark. No streetlights, no houses, just the black ribbon of gravel winding through the trees. That road was a beast, narrow as a goat path, with sheer drops on the left plunging down to rocky creeks I couldn't see, but could hear rushing far below. On the right, the forest pressed in tight, branches scratching the sides of my trailer like fingers trying to hold me back. No guardrails, of course. Uncle Sam don't waste money on frills out here. My headlights cut twin beams through the gloom, picking out potholes and fallen limbs, but mostly just endless dark. Cell service? Forget it. Those mountains eat signals like they're starving. I tried calling my wife Jenny before turning onto the road, just to say I'd be late, but it went straight to voicemail. "Love you, babe. Kiss the kids for me." That's all I got out before the bars dropped to nothing. The CB radio was my lifeline on those runs, crackling with voices from other drivers, loggers, coal haulers, the occasional tourist lost in the backcountry. But that night, it was dead quiet. I'd keyed the mic a few times early on. "Breaker, breaker, this is Timper Wolf on FS, whatever the hell this is. Anybody out there?" Static hissed back, broken only by faint pops that could have been interference or something else. I shrugged it off, cranked up the radio, some old country station fading in and out, and focused on the drive. The engine hummed steady, a deep rumble that vibrated through the seat, lulling me into that road trance where miles blur together. But there was something off about the air that night. It felt heavier, like the mountains were breathing down my neck. Every now and then a gust of wind would shake the trees, sending branches cracking like gunshots. I'd flinch, glance in the mirrors, see nothing but my taillights glowing red against the dark. I was about 10 miles in when it started. The road had straightened out a bit, letting me pick up to 30 or so without risking a rollover. My headlights swept across a curve, and there it was, something at the edge of the tree line. At first glance, I took it for a deer. They bolt out all the time out here, eyes shining like marbles in the beams. But this didn't bound away. It stood there, upright, tall as a man, but thinner, like it had been stretched on a rack. I eased off the gas, slowing to a crawl, my high beams flooding the spot. The figure didn't flinch, didn't raise a hand to shield its eyes. It just watched. Skin pale, almost grayish in the light, like it had never seen sun. No clothes I could make out, maybe rags dangling off bony shoulders, or maybe nothing at all. Its arms hung loose at its sides, fingers too long, twitching slightly. And the eyes,
God, those eyes reflected back like a cat's, twin pinpricks of green glow staring right into the cab. My stomach twisted. What the hell? I muttered, gripping the wheel tighter. I'd seen hitchhikers before, drifters looking for a ride out of the cold. But this wasn't that. No backpack, no thumb out, just standing there, motionless as a statue. I crept past, keeping my speed low, eyes flicking between the road and the side mirror. As the trailer cleared it, the figure stepped out onto the gravel. Not hurried, not stumbling, just a deliberate stride, like it had all the time in the world. It turned toward the truck, following in the wake of my lights. I watched it in the mirror, a silhouette now, arms swinging loose. Probably some meth head, I told myself, but my voice sounded thin in the cab. The old-timers' stories flickered in my mind. Feral folk, they called them, descendants of families that fled into the woods during the Depression or earlier during the wars. Gone wild, living off roots and whatever they could hunt, avoiding civilization like the plague. Tall tales, sure, but out here in the dark, with no one around, they didn't feel so tall. I pressed the accelerator, the engine growling as I took the next curve. The road twisted sharp, forcing me to brake again. Can't risk jackknifing with a full load. In the mirror, it was still there, walking steady, gaining a little with each glance. How? I was doing 25, 30 on the straights. No way a person on foot keeps pace. But there it was, closer now, details sharpening in the red glow of my brakes. The whistling started then, low at first, like wind through a cracked window, but it built, air hissing through teeth, sharp and piercing. It cut right through the engine noise, echoing off the trees on both sides, bouncing back until it felt like it was coming from everywhere. Not a tune, just a steady whistle, rising and falling like breath. My skin prickled, hair standing up on my arms. I grabbed the CB mic again. This is Timberwolf on the Seneca Creek Road. Got a walker tailing me. Anybody copy? Static roared back, louder than before, like the radio was screaming. The road narrowed even more, the drop-off yawning wider on my left. I had to hug the right side, branches whipping the mirror, leaves slapping like hands. Every curve I'd lose sight of it for a second, then it reappeared in the mirror, closer, always closer. The whistling grew, not louder but more insistent, vibrating in my chest. I could see its mouth now, lips pulled back in what might have been a grin or a grimace, teeth flashing white. Panic clawed up my throat. What if it caught up? What then? Jump on the trailer, bang on the cab. I thought of Jenny and the kids, little Tommy with his toy trucks, Sarah practicing her spelling words at the kitchen table. I couldn't let this thing stop me from getting home. But the road wouldn't let me speed up. One wrong turn and I'd be tumbling down the ravine, trailer crushing the cab like a tin can. Miles dragged on like hours, sweat beaded on my forehead, dripping into my eyes despite the cold. The whistling shifted, mixing with other sounds, rustles in the underbrush, like more shapes moving parallel to the road. Was it alone, or calling others? The old stories said they traveled in packs, silent as ghosts, taking what they needed from unwary travelers. A log truck gone missing last year. Folks said it was a washout, but no wreckage found. I shook my head, trying to focus. Just your mind playing tricks, I whispered, but the mirror didn't lie. It was right there, maybe 50 feet back now, stride unbroken. Finally, salvation, a pull-off up ahead, an old staging area where loggers used to park their rigs. It was overgrown, weeds choking the gravel, but wide enough for me to swing in and maybe turn around, or at least face whatever was coming. I signaled out of habit, though there was no one to see, and eased the truck off the road. The trailer groaned as it settled, brakes hissing like a sigh. The whistling stopped abrupt, leaving a silence that pressed in heavy, thicker than fog. My ears rang with the absence. I sat there a minute, hands shaking on the wheel, staring into the mirrors. Nothing moved. The tree line was still, no sign of the figure. Had it veered off, given up? I grabbed my flashlight from the glove box, a heavy mag light, the kind that doubles as a club, and my jacket. The cab felt too small, too vulnerable. Stepping out, the cold hit me like a slap, wind whispering through the bare branches. Gravel crunched under my boots as I walked around the truck, shining the beam over the tires, pretending to check for flats. Really, I was listening, scanning the woods. The pull-off backed up against a steep rise, trees climbing the slope like sentinels. Down the road where I'd come from, empty darkness. Up ahead, the same. "Hello," I called, voice cracking. Stupid, I know, inviting trouble, but the quiet was worse than any answer. Then it came again, the whistle, closer this time, from the woods right beside the pull-off, maybe 20 yards in, low and steady, laced with a new sound. scratching like nails on bark, slow and deliberate. My light swung toward it, beam trembling. Eyes flashed back, low to the ground, crouched maybe, glowing green. Then movement higher up, a shadow shifting between trunks, climbing, descending. I couldn't tell. The whistle rose, almost a keen now, vibrating the air. My heart hammered so hard I thought it burst. I backed toward the cab, light sweeping wild. Another rustle, to my left now, more eyes, or the same one circling. I didn't wait for it to show itself. Bolted for the door, yanked it open, slammed it shut, locked both sides, though what could that do against something that didn't care for roads or rules I didn't know? The engine roared to life, but I didn't pull out, just idled there, headlights flooding the tree line, high beams like a barrier. The whistling faded, then stopped. Silence again, but not peaceful. It felt watchful, patient. I sat there, gripping the wheel, sweat cooling on my skin. Minutes ticked by. 5.
I can still taste the fog from that morning, thick and bitter like old coffee left too long on the burner. It clings to the back of my throat even now, all these years later, whenever the weather turns damp and gray. Folks who've never driven those eastern Kentucky mountain roads think I'm exaggerating when I talk about how the mist rolls in and swallows everything whole, truck, road, sky, until you're floating in a world made of nothing but sound and memory. But I was there, back in the spring of 2003, when my old Kenworth decided to give up the ghost just as the first pale light was bleeding over the ridges. I remember every minute of it like it happened yesterday, and Lord knows I wish I didn't. I'd been running freight out of Hazard, hauling coal equipment up to a strip mine near the Virginia line. The load was heavy, dozer blades and track links chained down tight, but the money was good and the route was familiar. I'd done that stretch of KY 160 100 times, winding through the Daniel Boone National Forest, where the blacktop narrows to one lane in places, and the guardrails look like they were installed during the Roosevelt administration. Teddy, not Franklin. It was one of those mornings when the fog sits low in the hollows and doesn't burn off till near noon. I'd left the yard around 3 a.m., figuring to beat the worst of it, but by the time I crested Pine Mountain, the mist was so thick my high beams just bounced back at me like I was shining them into a wall of cotton. The truck had been running a little rough all night, slight miss in the engine, nothing major, but about 20 miles past Whitesburg she started coughing in earnest. Power dropped, tack needle fluttering, and I felt that sick lurch in my gut you get when you know you're about to be stranded. There's a wide spot up there on the downhill side, a gravel pull-off where log trucks used to turn around before they widened the road lower down. It overlooks a deep ravine choked with pine and rhododendron, the kind of place where the sun don't reach the ground till late summer. I eased the rig over, tires crunching on loose stone, and set the brakes with a hiss that sounded too loud and all that quiet. The engine died with a shudder, and then there was nothing but the tick of cooling metal and the slow drip of water off the leaves. I sat in the cab a minute, cursing my luck. No cell service up there, of course. Those mountains laugh at towers. The CB was just as dead. I've been trying to raise anybody for the last hour and got nothing but faint static. Dawn was starting to show, a sickly gray light filtering through the fog, but the birds hadn't started yet. That's what I noticed first. No songbirds, no crows, not even a squirrel chattering. Just silence so complete it felt like the world was holding its breath. I pulled on my jacket, grabbed my flashlight, even though it was getting light enough to see, and climbed down. My boots hit the gravel with a crunch that echoed off the hillside, and I swear the fog swallowed the sound whole. Popping the hood released a cloud of hot diesel smell that mixed with the wet earth and pine. I propped it open and leaned in, shining the light over the engine bay. Fuel filter looked dirty, probably water in the fuel from that sketchy station in Lynch. I keep a spare in the side box, so I figured 20 minutes, half-hour tops, and I'd be rolling again. The cold was already seeping through my jacket, that damp mountain cold that goes right to the bone. I worked quick, wiping condensation off my hands every few minutes, listening to the forest breathe around me. That's when I heard the first footstep. It was soft, deliberate, like someone placing their weight careful on wet leaves. Not the careless crash of a deer or the scamper of smaller critters. This was measured, human. I straightened up slow, peering over the hood into the fog downhill. Nothing moved that I could see, just gray trunks fading into white mist. "Hello?" I called, voice sounding thin even to me. "Anybody out there?" The only answer was a single drop of water falling from a branch overhead. I waited, ears straining, but the quiet pressed back in heavier than before. I told myself it was nothing, maybe a coon or a fox, and went back to work, but my skin was prickling now, that old instinct you get when you know you're being watched. I'd grown up hunting these hills with my daddy. I knew what it felt like to have a buck staring at you from cover. This was different.
This felt patient. The footsteps started again a few minutes later, closer this time, coming from the ravine side. I could hear the leaves compress under weight, slow and steady, circling wide around the pull-off. I set the wrench down quiet and picked up the tire iron instead. Heavy iron, good balance. Bears come through there sometimes, black bears mostly, and though they usually avoid people, a hungry one might get bold around a stopped truck. But bears don't walk like that. Bears crash and huff. This was quiet, almost thoughtful. I stepped away from the engine, moving to the edge of the gravel where it dropped sharp into the trees. The fog was thinning a little as the light grew, and I could make out individual trunks now, dark pillars disappearing downward. "I hear you," I said, trying to sound firm. "Come on out if you need help." My voice cracked on the last word, giving me away. No answer. Just another footstep. Pause. Then another. Like whoever it was had stopped when I spoke. I stood there a long minute, tire iron gripped tight, scanning the tree line. Then I saw it. Movement low to the ground. A shape shifting between trunks maybe 40 yards down the slope. Human-sized, but hunched, moving on all fours for a second before rising to two legs and slipping behind a pine. My breath caught. Could have been a hunter in camo, but no orange that I saw, and no reason to be sneaking like that at dawn. I backed toward the truck, keeping my eyes on the spot where it disappeared. The footsteps resumed, but softer now, angling uphill toward the pull-off. I lost sight of whatever it was in the mist, but I could feel it repositioning, keeping the truck between us. Every time I moved to get a better look, the sound shifted, like it was mirroring me, staying just out of sight. My hands were shaken bad enough that I near dropped the tire iron. I'd heard stories around the truck stops, old drivers talking about ridge runners, wild people who'd lived back in the hollows so long they'd gone half feral, families that never came down during the coal strikes, or moonshiners who hid out after the revenues got too close. Most folks laughed them off as tall tales, but the older men got quiet when the subject came up, same way they did talking about mine disasters. I forced myself back to the engine, had to get moving, couldn't stand there all day waiting for whatever was out there to make up its mind. The new filter went in clumsy, my fingers numb from cold and fear both. Every few seconds I'd glance up, expecting to see someone step out of the fog. Nothing, but the feeling of being watched never left. If anything, it grew stronger, like pressure building behind my eyes. The grunt came sudden, a low, wet sound from the throat, more cough than word. It was close, no more than 20 feet into the trees. I froze, wrench halfway to a bolt. The sound came again, deeper this time, almost questioning. Not animal, not quite. I've heard bears, heard panthers even down in the Red River Gorge, and this wasn't either. This had weight behind it, intelligence. I straightened slow, turning toward the sound. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw eyes reflecting the weak dawn light, low to the ground, then higher as whatever it was rose up. I caught just a glimpse, tall but stooped, limbs long and thin under a tangle of dark hair that hung to the waist, skin pale where it showed, streaked with dirt or old soot. It moved quick behind a trunk when my light swung toward it, but not before I saw the way it held itself, head cocked, watching, not scared, curious maybe, or deciding. That was enough. I slammed the hood harder than I meant to, the bang echoing down the ravine like a gunshot, dove for the cab door, tire iron still in hand. The engine turned over on the third try, thank God for small mercies, and coughed with a roar that felt like salvation. I didn't bother with seatbelt or mirrors, just eased the clutch and rolled forward slow, gravel spitting under the duals. I watched the mirrors the whole time. At first nothing, just swirling mist and dark trees sliding past. Then as the pull-off disappeared around a curve, I saw it. The figure stepped out into the open gravel where I'd been working, stood fully upright now and taller than I had thought, 6.5 feet easy, maybe more. Arms hung loose at its sides, head tilted like it was listening to my engine fade. No wave, no chase, just standing there in the middle of the pull-off, owning that piece of mountain like it had every right. The hair covered most of its face, but I could feel it staring after me, patient as stone. I didn't slow down again till I hit the truck stop in Jenkins near 2 hours later. Hands still shaking, I got coffee and told a couple of the old boys what I'd seen. Big mistake. They went quiet, exchanging looks over their cups. One of them, a fella named Delmer, who'd hauled coal since the 70s, finally spoke up. "You stopped too long up on Pine Mountain, didn't you?" he said. I nodded. He shook his head slow. "Ridge runners don't like folks lingering on their ground. Count hisself lucky it just watched. Some ain't so polite. I never took that route again if I could help it. Stuck to the 4 lanes, even if it added hours, but the memory stuck harder than pine sap. Some mornings when the fog rolls in thick and the birds stay quiet, I'll catch myself scanning the tree line, looking for that tall shape among the trunks, wondering if it's still there, waiting for the next truck to cough and die at dawn, wondering what it wanted, why it didn't come closer, why it let me go. My wife says I dream about it, talk in my sleep, wake up reaching for something to fight with. Maybe I do. There's nights when the wind moves through the pines outside our place, and I swear I hear that low grunt carried on it, questioning still. I lock the doors tighter those nights, pull the curtains, tell myself it's just memory playing tricks. But deep down I know better. Some things in these mountains don't need to chase you. They know the roads, know the hollows, know how to wait. And once they've seen you stop, once they've weighed you and let you drive away, part of you never really leaves that pull-off. I still drive for a living, though I'm closer to retirement now. Different truck, different loads, but I keep a new tire iron in the cab and an extra filter in the box. And when the fog comes down heavy on some lonely stretch, I keep moving, because stopping, even for a minute, means giving whatever's out there time to decide, and I've already used up my one pass. The worst part isn't the fear anymore, it's the wondering. What if I'd stayed longer? What if the truck hadn't started? Would it have come closer, shown its face, spoken whatever words it uses, or would it have just waited till I walked into the trees looking for help? Some questions don't have answers you want to live with, so I keep driving, keep watching the mirrors, keep listening for footsteps that match my own pace, but come from somewhere else entirely. These mountains hold their secrets close. They've buried whole towns under strip mines, swallowed men in cave-ins, hidden stills and graves and worse. Whatever I saw that morning is just one more thing they keep. And sometimes when the light's right and the fog sits low, I think they let it out to look around, to remind folks like me that the roads are borrowed, not owned, that stopping too long means paying a toll most never come back from. I reckon that's why the birds went quiet that day. They knew what was coming down from the ridge long before I did. Animals got sense about such things. Wish I'd listened to them instead of my schedule. Wish a lot of things. But wishes don't change what's waiting up there on Pine Mountain when the fog rolls in and a rig goes silent. Some mornings I wake before dawn, heart pounding, convinced I hear gravel crunching under slow footsteps outside the bedroom window. I never get up to look anymore. Some sights you only survive once.
I still can't listen to a CB radio without feeling that old knot twist in my stomach. It's been near 20 years now, but some nights, especially when the snow starts falling soft and quiet, I'll catch myself straining to hear something on the wind that ain't there. Or maybe it is, and I just don't want to admit it. My wife tells me to let it go, that I imagine most of it, but she wasn't in that cab with me on that stretch of US 441 through the Great Smoky Mountains, somewhere between Gatlinburg and Cherokee, when the whispers found me. I was alone, or at least I thought I was, and the mountains have a way of making you question what alone really means. Back then I drove overnight hauls for a small outfit out of Knoxville, furniture mostly, bedroom sets and dining tables headed to dealers down in Asheville or over in South Carolina. The money was better on night runs because nobody else wanted them, and truth be told, I liked the quiet. No tourists crawling along in rental cars, no RVs hogging both lanes, just me and the road in the dark pressing in from every side. The Smokies at night feel different than anywhere else I've driven. The forest crowds right up to the asphalt, trees so thick overhead that even on a full moon night, the headlights are all you've got. It's like driving through a tunnel that never ends, the beams cutting a narrow path through black water. That particular run was in late January, one of those winters where the cold sinks deep and stays. I'd left the warehouse around 10 that evening, trailer loaded with oak dressers wrapped in blankets and strapped tight. The forecast called for flurries after midnight, nothing serious, but up in the passes even a dusting can turn those switchbacks treacherous. I figured I'd be through Newfound Gap before it got bad, and down into North Carolina by dawn. Coffee in a thermos, Merle Haggard on the tape deck, CB turned low in case any other night haulers were out. Everything normal. The first hour or so was peaceful. Snow started as I climbed toward the park boundary, big lazy flakes drifting through the headlights, melting as soon as they hit the warm hood. The road was empty. Even the park rangers had called it a night. I remember thinking how pretty it looked, the way the snow softened everything, made the world feel muffled and far away. That's the thing about the mountains. They'll show you beauty right before they show you something else entirely. Around 1:30, maybe 2, I was deep in the switchbacks above the Okanalufty Valley when the CB crackled. Not the usual burst of static or a clear voice breaking in, but something faint, like someone holding the mic too far from their mouth. A whisper. I turned the volume up a notch, figuring it was another driver down in a hollow where the signal was weak. "Breaker, breaker," I said, keeping it casual. "You got a copy." Nothing but more whispers. Soft, hurried, words running together so I couldn't catch them. The tone was wrong, though. Urgent. Almost scared. I tried again a couple times, asking if they needed help, if they were broken down somewhere. Only more whispers answered, rising and falling like wind through pines. I told myself it was Skip, signals bouncing off the atmosphere,
Some far-off conversation bleeding through. Happens sometimes in the mountains. I turned the squelch up to cut the noise and went back to driving. But the whispers didn't stop. They got quieter when I adjusted the squelch, but they were still there, threading underneath the static. And then clear, as if someone was sitting in the jump seat beside me, I heard my name, my first name, Ronnie, spoken soft and slow, drawn out like a question. I hadn't given my handle that night, hadn't talked to anybody. My blood went cold. I snatched the mic up. "Who is this? How'd you know my name?" Static roared back, loud and empty. The whispers faded, then returned. My name again, repeated, overlapping like 2 or 3 voices saying it at once. I killed the CB, twisted the knob hard until it clicked off. The cab fell silent except for the engine and the tires hissing over fresh snow. My heart was hammering so loud I could hear it in my ears. I told myself it was a prank, somebody who knew me from previous runs messing with me. But nobody was out that night. I hadn't seen a single set of taillights since leaving Gatlinburg. The whispers kept going. Not on the radio anymore. Outside, faint, brushing against the driver's side window like breath on glass. I glanced over, expecting to see snow sliding off the mirror, but there was nothing, just darkness and falling flakes. Still, I heard it. Ronnie, soft and bleeding, coming from right beside the cab. I rolled the window up tighter, though it was already closed, turned the radio to music loud enough to drown it out. Merle's voice filled the cab, but underneath his guitar, I could still make out that faint calling, like it was inside my head now. The road climbed higher, switchback sharpening as I neared the cab. Snow was sticking now, a thin white blanket over the asphalt. I downshifted, keeping speed low, trying to focus on the yellow line, but the whispers grew, multiplying. Different voices, some high, some low, all soft, all saying my name or fragments I couldn't catch. They seemed to come from the forest itself, seeping through the fence, sliding under the door seals. I needed to stop, needed air, needed to prove to myself it was nothing. There's a scenic overlook just below Newfound Gap, a wide gravel pull-off with a low stone wall, and a view down into the valley on all your days. That night it was socked in with snow and fog, but I saw the reflectors and eased the rig over, tires crunching loud in the silence. I set the brakes, let the engine idle to keep the heater going, and sat there a minute with my hands clenched on the wheel. The whispers had quieted when I stopped moving, but the air felt thick, expectant. I grabbed the big mag light from under the seat, 3D cells, heavy enough to hurt if you swung it right, and climbed down. The cold hit like a slap, sharp and wet. Snow was falling steady now, big flakes drifting straight down in the still air. My boots sank an inch into fresh power as I walked to the edge of the overlook. I swept the flashlight beam across the stone wall and down the slope. Nothing but trees, dark trunks marching downhill into whiteness, branches heavy with new snow. The forest was dead quiet. No wind, no animals, no distant traffic, just the low rumble of my engine behind me. The whispers started again. They came from below, down in the trees, multiple voices, low and overlapping, rising through the snow like smoke. My name over and over, soft as a lullaby but wrong somehow, like children trying to imitate adult speech. I aimed the light downhill, beam cutting a tunnel through the flakes. For a second I saw nothing, then movement, shapes shifting just beyond where the light reached, figures crouched low among the trunks, heads tilted, watching me. I stepped closer to the wall, heart pounding so hard my chest hurt. The beam trembled in my grip. As I swept it slow, the shapes moved with it, ducking behind trees when the light got close, reappearing farther along. Pale faces caught the edge of the glow, thin, dirt-streaked, framed by tangled hair that hung past shoulders, eyes wide and reflecting the light like animals, but the faces were human, or close enough to make my skin crawl. They didn't come closer, just watched, heads cocked, mouths moving in unison with the whispers that floated up the slope. Ronnie. I backed away slow, keeping the light on them. The voices rose, pleading now, almost singing my name. Not angry, not threatening, just insistent, like they wanted me to come down, to join them. I felt it in my gut, a pull stronger than fear, like stepping off the wall would be the easiest thing in the world. I turned and walked fast to the truck, boots slipping on snow. Didn't run, didn't want to give them that, but my breath came in ragged bursts. I climbed in, slammed the door, locked it, though I knew a lock wouldn't matter. The whispers followed me right up to the cab, brushing the windows like fingers. In the side mirror I saw them, more now, a dozen maybe, standing at the edge of the tree line below the overlook, tall and thin, hunched against the snow, hair dark with wet. They didn't step into the open gravel, just stood there watching, mouths moving silent now, but I could still hear them inside my head. I released the brakes and eased back onto the road, not fast, didn't want to slide off into the ravine, but steady. The whispers faded as I drove, growing softer with every turn until they were gone, but the quiet that replaced them was worse. I kept checking the mirrors, expecting to see shapes running alongside in the trees. For miles I got glimpses, shadows keeping pace just inside the tree line, moving smooth and silent through the snow-laden brush, never close enough to see clear, but there, always there. I made the delivery in Cherokee just as the sun was coming up gray behind the ridges, unloaded in silence, hands still shaking. Told the dispatcher I was taking the interstate home, no matter the extra hours. He didn't argue, said I looked like I'd seen a ghost. Maybe I had. I never drove that stretch at night again, stuck to daylight or took the long way around through Maggie Valley, but the whisper stayed with me. Some nights I'd wake up hearing my name spoken soft in the dark bedroom, my wife sleeping peaceful beside me. I'd lie there listening till dawn, afraid to move. Other times, driving familiar roads years later, I'd catch a flicker in the mirror, a tall shape among the trees that was gone when I looked again. The old-timers at the truck stop didn't laugh when I finally told a couple of them, just nodded slow, eyes on their coffee. One said his uncle had heard the same thing back in the 50s, pulled over and never drove again. Another mentioned families that disappeared during the Depression, whole clans walking into the park and never coming out. Folks say the mountains keep them, change them, teach them new ways to call travelers down. I don't know what they were, don't want to know, but I know they knew my name before I ever spoke it, and they wanted me to stop, to listen, to follow. I didn't, and part of me has regretted that ever since. Not because I think I'd have been better off going to them, Lord no, but because some questions don't ever get answered if you drive away. These days I'm retired, living quiet in a little house outside Saterville. Snow still falls soft some winters, muffling the world like it did that night. When it does, I keep the curtains drawn and the TV on low, because sometimes, just sometimes, when the wind moves through the pines behind the house, I hear it again, soft voices calling from the tree line, patient as ever. Ronnie. And I wonder if they're still waiting up there on that overlook, watching the road for a rig to slow down in the snow. Wonder if they ever forget a name once they've learned it. I lock the doors tighter those nights, and I don't answer.
I can still feel the heat of that summer night clinging to my skin, the kind of humid that makes your shirt stick to your back, even with the windows down and the fan blowing full. It was July, maybe 2008, hauling coal out of a small tipple near Welch, West Virginia, low sulfur stuff headed to a power plant over in Virginia. The run was supposed to be simple, 40 miles of mostly gravel Forest Service roads that cut through the Monongahela, then hit pavement and roll easy the rest of the way. I'd done it plenty of times, liked the solitude, liked the way the mountains felt like they were holding their breath when the rest of the world was asleep. The air was thick that night, heavy with the smell of pine and coal dust that never quite washes out of your truck. My old Peterbilt was running smooth, trailer loaded heavy enough that every pothole jarred my teeth. I kept the high beams on full, twin tunnels of white light slicing through the dark. The gravel road was narrow, barely wide enough for the rig, and the trees pressed in close on both sides, branches reaching like they wanted to touch the trailer. Dust boiled up behind me in a long cloud that glowed red in the taillights, then settled slow like it was in no hurry to disappear. I was maybe 15 miles in, on one of those long stretches where the road feels like it goes on forever, when something crossed the beam. Quick, too quick. Not a deer. Deer don't move upright like that. It was a flash of pale skin and dark hair, sprinting across the road from left to right, gone before I could even register the shape. I slammed the brakes hard. The trailer swayed, chains rattling, tires biting gravel. The cab lurched forward, then settled, engine idling loud in the sudden quiet. I sat there, gripping the wheel, heart hammering, staring at the empty road ahead. Nothing, just dust settling in the headlights, swirling slow. I told myself it was a bear cub standing up, or maybe a drunk stumbling home from some backwoods party, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I eased off the brake, rolled forward slow, high beam sweeping the tree line. The road stayed empty. I was starting to breathe again when it crossed again, this time slower, from the right side to the left. A man, naked or close to it, dirt streaked across his chest and arms like camouflage. He moved on all fours for the first few steps, then rose upright, loper across the beam like he owned the road. He stopped dead center in the light, maybe 20 feet ahead, head cocked to one side at an angle no human neck should hold, staring straight into the windshield, straight into me. I couldn't move. Those eyes, wide, unblinking, reflecting the high beams like mirrors, held no fear, just curiosity, like I was the strange thing here, not him. His hair hung in matted ropes past his shoulders, black and wet with sweat or dew, skin pale where it wasn't covered in grime. He stood there a long 5 seconds, then darted left into the trees, quick as a shadow, gone. I sat frozen, engine rumbling, listening to my own breathing. Part of me wanted to floor it and never look back. The other part, the part that grew up in these hills, knew better than to run blind on a road that twists like a snake. I checked the mirrors, nothing behind, nothing ahead, just dust in the dark. After a minute, I let the clutch out slow and started rolling again, every muscle tight,
eyes flicking between the road and the tree line. A mile later, he crossed again, closer this time, maybe 10 feet in front of the bumper. Same movement, drop to all fours, then rise, pause, stare, head tilted the same unnatural way, then gone into the woods on the left. My knuckles went white on the wheel. I didn't brake this time, just kept moving, slow, steady, like if I pretended he wasn't there, he'd go away. But he didn't. He appeared again, and again, every mile or so, always ahead, always crossing from one side to the other, always stopping just long enough for me to see him clear in the lights, never running from me, never chasing, just guiding, herding, like he was making sure I stayed on the road, stayed in his world. Each time he stood longer, head cocked, eyes locked on mine through the glass. I started talking to him, quiet, hoarse, asking what he wanted, telling him to leave me be. My voice sounded small in the cab, swallowed by the engine noise. The road stayed narrow, stayed gravel, stayed empty. No other trucks, no headlights coming the other way. Just me and him and the mountains that seemed to close in tighter with every mile. Sweat rolled down my ribs. The humidity pressed against the windshield like a hand. I kept the windows cracked just enough to hear if he made any sound, but there was nothing. No footsteps, no breathing, no rustle of leaves. Only silence between crossings. Silence so thick it hurt my ears. Around the 8th crossing, I started seeing things in the mirrors. Shadows moving parallel to the road, deep in the trees on both sides. Not clear enough to be sure, but tall shapes keeping pace, slipping from trunk to trunk, more than one. I told myself it was just the dust, just my eyes playing tricks from staring too long into the lights. But every time I glanced back, they were there, silent, patient, matching my speed. I prayed for pavement, prayed for a town, a gas station, another driver, anything human. The road climbed slow, then dropped into a hollow where the trees grew even thicker, branches meeting overhead like a tunnel. He crossed again, this time so close I could see the ribs under his skin, the way his fingers curled like claws when he stood. He didn't dart away right off. He took 2 slow steps toward the truck, head still tilted, then turned and slipped into the dark on the right. I swear I heard a low sound then, not a word, just air moving through teeth like a sigh. 10 miles of that, 10 miles of crossings and staring, of being watched. My throat was dry, my hands cramped from gripping the wheel. I kept the speed steady at 25. Any faster and I'd risk sliding off into the ravine. Any slower and I was afraid he'd come closer. The dashboard clock ticked past 3 a.m. The sky stayed black, the mountains stayed quiet. Then, finally, the gravel gave way to cracked blacktop. A county road sign appeared in the beams. Route 52, lights in the distance. A small town I didn't know the name of, just a cluster of houses and a blinking yellow light. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. The road widened, the trees fell back. I glanced in the mirror one last time. He was there, standing at the very edge of the tree line where the gravel met pavement, upright, motionless, head still tilted that wrong way, not following, just watching. The high beams caught him clear, pale skin, dark hair, eyes reflecting back like coins. He didn't move as I rolled past, didn't wave, didn't run, just stood until the curve took him out of sight. I kept looking back until the town swallowed the mirror view completely. I pulled into the first lit gas station I saw, killed the engine, and sat there shaking. My shirt was soaked through. I didn't get out right away, just stared at the road behind me, waiting for him to step into the light. He never did. Later, at the drop-off in Virginia, I told a couple of old miners who'd been hauling longer than I'd been alive. They listened without smiling. One of them nodded slow. That stretch borders the old Miguel settlements, he said. Whole families walked into those woods after the mines closed in the 30s, never came back out. Some say they're still there, keeping the roads clear of folks who don't belong. He looked at me a long time. You interrupted his crossing. Next time he might not let you finish the run. I never took night hauls through that part of West Virginia again. Switched to daylight runs, stuck to interstates when I could. But some nights when the air gets thick and humid like it did back then, I'll catch myself slowing down on empty stretches, high beams on, watching the road ahead, waiting for something to cross the beam. It never has. Not yet. But I know he's still out there, standing just inside the tree line, head tilted, waiting for the next truck to come through slow enough to notice, waiting for the next driver to interrupt his crossing. And when that happens, I wonder if he'll just watch again, or if he'll decide it's time to step fully into the light and ask why we keep coming back. Some roads aren't meant to be driven at night, some crossings aren't meant to be seen, and some things in the mountains remember every face that passes through their territory. They don't forget, they wait. I still drive, still haul coal when the money's right, but I keep my high beams on longer than I used to, and every time I hit gravel, I hold my breath, listening for the soft pad of bare feet crossing just ahead. They never come, but I know they could, and that knowing is enough to keep me from sleeping straight through any summer night when the air feels too heavy and the dark presses too close.
I can still feel the damp chill of that fog wrapping around me like a shroud, even though it's been years since that night in the Tennessee hills. It seeps into my dreams sometimes, turning ordinary drives into endless crawls through white nothing, where every bump in the road sounds like a knock waiting to be answered. I was 38 back then, hauling for a lumber company out of Johnson City, mostly short runs through the backcountry, picking up loads from mills tucked in the hollows and dropping them at yards near the interstate. That particular night, I delivered a full trailer of pine boards to a site near Irwin and was heading back empty, the rig lighter and bouncier without the weight. It was early fall, the kind where the days are still warm but the nights drop quick, pulling mist up from the rivers like ghosts rising from graves. The route I took was an old county road that dipped down into a low hollow along the Nolichucky River. Folks call it Foggy Bottom, though it's not marked on any map that way. It's one of those stretches where the mountains squeeze in close, the road hugging the riverbank with sheer rock on one side and dense woods climbing the other. I'd driven it dozens of times in daylight, but night changes everything out there. The trees loom taller, the curves sharper, and the isolation hits harder. No houses for miles, no cell towers, just you and whatever the dark decides to share. I remember thinking it was a good night for it, though. Moon low and hidden behind ridges, stars pinpricked through the canopy. I had the windows cracked to let in the cool air, the scent of wet earth and decaying leaves mixing with diesel fumes. My thermos of coffee was half gone, radio tuned to a staticky AM station playing old gospel hymns that fading in and out like distant prayers. As I dropped into the hollow, the fog started. Slow at first, a thin veil drifting across the road, swirling in my headlights like smoke from a dying fire. But it thickened quick, the river feeding it moisture until visibility dropped to maybe 20 yards. The beams bounced back at me, turning the world into a glowing white wall. I slowed to a crawl, 15 miles an hour tops, relying on memory for the curves. I'd feel the road tilt left or right, ease the wheel accordingly, listening to the gravel crunch under the tires. The empty trailer rattled behind me, a hollow echo that made the silence feel deeper. No other traffic, no headlights piercing the mist ahead or behind, just the low rumble of the engine and the occasional drip of condensation from the trees overhead. I was deep in the bottom, where the road runs flattest and the fog sits heaviest, when I heard the first knocks. 3 sharp raps, clear as gunshots, right against the trailer side near the rear axle. I flinched, coffee sloshing in the cup holder. My first thought was a branch, low-hanging limb scraping as I passed, or maybe a rock kicked up by the tires. Happens sometimes on these back roads. I eased off the gas, let the rig coast a bit, listening. Nothing more came. The fog pressed closer, swallowing the sound of the river I knew was running just off to my left. I told myself it was nothing, took a sip of coffee, and kept rolling slow. But the knocks came again a minute later. Same rhythm, 3 deliberate taps, this time from farther back near the tail. Not random, not like debris. These were measured, like someone testing the metal with knuckles. My skin prickled. I glanced in the side mirror, but the fog turned it into a blank white glow. No shapes, no movement. I reached for the CB mic out of habit. Anybody copy on this channel? Got a strange noise down in Foggy Bottom. Static hissed back, thick and empty. No surprise. Signals don't carry worth a damn in these low places. I should have kept dragging. Should have chalked it up to imagination and pushed through till the road climbed out. But empty trailers make funny noises sometimes, and I didn't want to drag a broken chain or loose mud flap all the way back to the yard. There's a wide spot just past the deepest part of the hollow. Gravel shoulder big enough to pull over without blocking the road. I eased in there, tires crunching loud. Set the brakes with a hiss that echoed strange in the damp air. The engine idled steady, headlights cutting 2 short tunnels into nothing. I grabbed the big flashlight from the door pocket, heavy mag light, the kind that doubles as something mean if you need it, and climbed down. The fog hit me like stepping into milk, cold, wet, clinging to my jacket instant. My boots sank slight in the soft gravel, and every sound felt muffled, like the world had cotton stuffed in its ears. I walked the length of the trailer slow, beams sweeping the side panels. No scratches, no branches caught, just rivulets of condensation running down the aluminum. The air smelled stronger here, river mud and rotting leaves, thick enough to taste. I called out once, voice flat and swallowed quick. Hello? Anybody out there? Nothing answered but the drip from the trees overhead. I was halfway back to the rear doors when the knock started again. 3 raps, slow and sure from the very end of the trailer. My heart jumped. I swung the light that way fast, beam trembling. The fog glowed white, revealing nothing but the red reflectors on the doors. I took a step closer, listening. Silence pressed back, heavy as the mist. Then tap, 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 from underneath now, low against the undercarriage, deliberate as a heartbeat. I froze. Bears don't knock like that. Coons don't either. I crouched slow, knees cracking, and aimed the light under the trailer. The beam caught axles and mud flaps, shadows thick between. At first, nothing. Then eyes. 2 wide, human eyes, staring back from the dark, maybe 3 feet in. A face pressed close to the ground, filthy with mud or worse, hair matted and hanging in strings. The eyes didn't blink, just watched, reflecting the light dull like old glass. I jerked back, breath catching sharp. The face didn't move, didn't speak. Then one more knock, slow, right under where I crouched, like it was answering my look. A hand came into the beam, pale, dirt-caked fingers tapping the metal once, deliberate. I stumbled upright, light swinging wild. On the opposite side I heard movement, quick scrape of body on gravel as whatever it was crawled out fast and vanished into the fog. I didn't think, just ran.
boots slipping on wet stone, flashlight bouncing. Back to the cab door. Yanked it open, climbed in, slammed and locked it, though I knew a lock wouldn't matter out here. My chest heaved, hands shaking so bad I near dropped the light. The engine was still idling, warm and familiar. I sat there a minute, staring into the white nothing outside the windshield, waiting for another knock, for a face to appear at the glass. It didn't come right away. Silence stretched, broken only by the tick of cooling metal in my own ragged breathing. I told myself it was gone. Some drifter, maybe, or a hunter lost in the fog. Harmless, curious. I shifted into gear, eased forward blind, following the faint memory of the road's edge. The trailer rattled as I picked up speed, 5-10 miles an hour, slow enough to stop if I felt the drop-off. Then the knocks started again. Soft at first, pacing me along the trailer ring. Tap, tap, tap from the rear, then midway, then up near the fifth wheel, like footsteps running alongside, but underneath, fingers drumming metal in rhythm with my tires. I pressed the gas harder, fog swirling thick, curves coming blind. The knocks kept perfect time, never hurried, never falling behind. I couldn't see anything in the mirrors, just white glow, but I felt it there, matching my pace. Curious or hungry, I couldn't tell. The hollow seemed endless that night. Every curve I expected the road to climb, to break free of the mist, but it dipped deeper. River louder now, though still invisible. The knocks grew bolder, sometimes 3, sometimes 4, sometimes a long scrape like nails testing for weakness. Sweat ran cold down my back despite the heater blasting. I talked to myself low, voice shaking, prayers my mama taught me, curses my daddy used, anything to fill the cab with human sound. I don't know how long it lasted, minutes that felt like hours. The road finally tilted upward, gravel giving way to cracked pavement as I climbed the R side. The fog thinned, slow, trees emerging from the white like skeletons. The knocks faded with it, last few taps faint, almost reluctant, then nothing. I crested the ridge doing 40, faster than safe, but needing sky above me again. The mist fell away behind, river and hollow swallowed whole. I didn't stop till I hit the yard in Johnson City hours later than planned. Told the night foreman I'd had trouble with the fog, left it at that. But the old boys who unloaded Dawn heard something in my voice. One of them, gray-haired fella named Clyde, who'd hauled these roads since the 70s, pulled me aside over coffee. "Foggy bottom?" he asked quiet. I nodded. He looked at me long. "Some things live down in them low places. Old families, or what's left. They come out when the mist's thick, curious about folks passing through. Best not to stop next time." I took the higher routes after that. Longer miles, more fuel, but daylight when I could get it. Still drive for a living, though I'm nearer 60 now than 50. But when fall nights turn damp and the rivers rise, I feel that fog waiting in the low places. Hear phantom knocks in every rattle of an empty trailer. Some mornings I'll wake before dawn, convinced I hear it. 3 sharp raps against the bedroom wall, patient, waiting for me to answer. I never do. Just lie there till light creeps in, wondering what it wanted that night. To be seen, to be let in, or just to remind me that the hollows remember every truck that slows down, every driver who steps out alone. The mountains keep their secrets close, and some knocks aren't meant to be answered. They just echo, waiting for the next fog to roll in thick enough to hide what's listening on the other side. I still take the long way around Foggy Bottom, always will, but part of me wonders if it matters. Some things, once they've touched your rig, once they've looked you in the eye from underneath, don't need roads to follow. They wait in the low places, patient as mist, knocking soft when the world goes quiet. And one of these nights, when the fog sits heavy, and I'm old and slow, I reckon I'll hear those 3 raps again. Clear, deliberate, close. I hope I'm wrong, but down in these hollows, hope don't carry far.
I still catch myself staring at the top of my trailer sometimes, even on bright interstate runs with traffic all around, looking for those bare little footprints in the dust. It's been over a decade now, but the memory sits heavy on me, like a load that's shifted wrong and won't settle no matter how many straps you throw over it. I was hauling out of a small sawmill near Robbinsville, North Carolina, back in the summer of 2011. Short overnight loops through the Nantahala forest, picking up rough-cut lumber and dropping it at a finishing yard in Murphy before dawn. The money was decent, the hours quiet, and I liked the feel of those mountain roads at night when the tourists were gone and the woods belonged to the people who'd always lived there. The road out of the mill was mostly gravel and red clay, winding through stands of pine and oak so thick the moonlight barely reached the ground. Dust hung in the air after every load, coating the trailer sides and top in a fine layer that turned gray by morning. My rig was an old flatbed with low sides, easy to load with a forklift, and I'd throw a tarp over the lumber once it was strapped down, but the top rails and the forward bulkhead always collected that dust thick. I'd usually blow it off with the air hose at the yard, but some nights I'd be too tired and just let it ride. The first time I noticed the prints was on a Tuesday morning, pulling into the Murphy yard just as the sun cleared the ridges. The dew was still heavy, and the dust on top of the trailer had turned to light mud in places. I climbed up on the catwalk to check the straps like I always do, and that's when I saw them. Small, bare footprints walking straight down the center of the bulkhead, from the front edge clean to the back. 5, maybe 6 prints in a line, toes pointed forward, heel digs clear. Child-sized, I'd say, or a small woman, fresh enough that the edges hadn't crumbled yet. I stood there a minute,
coffee going cold in my hand, staring at them. No way somebody climbed up at the mill. The loader operator was right there the whole time, and the yard's fenced with cameras. No stops on the road. It's 40 miles of nothing but forest and switchbacks. I told myself kids must have messed around at the Murphy yard while I was inside doing paperwork, though the trailer had been parked under floodlights and I'd only been gone 10 minutes. I shook it off, hosed the top down when I got back to Robbinsville, and forgot about it till the next night. Wednesday's run was the same. Loaded late, pulled out around midnight, dust kicking up thick behind me in the headlights. The air was warm and still, cicadas screaming in the trees, that heavy mountain quiet where you can hear your own engine miles away. I made good time, delivered before sunrise again, and when I climbed up to unstrap, there they were. More footprints, same size, same bare soles, but this time starting farther back and walking all the way to the front edge. And along the top rail, dusty hand smudges, small fingers spread wide like someone had leaned over to look down at the cab. My stomach dropped. I checked the tarp, still tight, no tears, straps undisturbed, no mud on the tires or sides where someone could have climbed. The prints were in clean dust, no overlapping boot tracks, nothing. I walked the whole yard, asked the night watchman if he'd seen kids or anybody near my truck. He looked at me funny and said nobody had been around since I'd pulled in. I hosed it again, harder this time, scrubbing with a broom till the aluminum shone. Told myself it was pranksters with good timing, or maybe I was just tired and seeing things. Thursday night I loaded up again, same route, same dust cloud trailing me through the dark. I kept checking the mirrors like an idiot, expecting to see shapes on top of the trailer, but there was nothing but black and the red glow of my marker lights. The road felt longer that night, every curve tighter, every straight stretch watched. I turned the radio off halfway through, listening to the tires and the chains rattling, half expecting to hear footsteps overhead. Didn't hear a thing, but the quiet felt wrong, heavy, like the mountains were leaning in to listen. Friday morning after delivery, I climbed up slow, already knowing what I'd find. The top was clean when I'd left Robbinsville. I'd checked twice under the floodlights, but now the prints were back, deeper this time, pressed hard into the dust like whatever made them had been walking deliberate, claiming the space. A full line from back to front, then turning at the edge and coming halfway back. Handprints too, clean smudges along both rails, fingers gripping like someone had balanced there a while, peering down. I felt eyes on me then, standing up there in the morning light with trucks idling all around. Not from the yard, from the tree line across the fence, though nothing moved. I hosed it again, scrubbed till my arms ached, even climbed up with soap and a rag to wipe every inch. Told the yard boss I was feeling sick, took the day off, went home and slept with the curtains drawn. Saturday I had to run again, bills don't wait, and I loaded up nervous, checking the top 3 times before pulling out. The dust rose, same as always, coating everything fresh. I drove slower that night, windows up, AC on though, was cool enough. Every bump I waited for a thump overhead, every straight stretch I watched the mirrors for movement. Nothing. Delivered clean Sunday morning, heart pounding as I climbed the ladder. The prints were there, deeper than before. Pressed so hard the dust had caked in the tread patterns of tiny toes. A perfect trail front to back, then along the driver's side rail, stopping where someone could have crouched and looked straight down through the windshield. Handprints overlapped each other like it had gone back and forth exploring, and at the very front, right above the cab, a single set of prints facing forward, knees bent, weight settled, like whatever it was had ridden there the whole way, watching the road with me. I didn't hose it that time, just stood there till the yard boss yelled at me to move. Drove home slow, checking the mirrors constant, feeling the weight up there, even though I knew it couldn't be. That was my last run on that route. Told the dispatcher I couldn't do nights anymore. Took longer hauls on the interstate, daylight only when I could get it. But the feeling never left. Some nights, parked at rest stops with other trucks all around, I'd wake up sudden, convinced I heard soft footsteps crossing the trailer top, bare soles patting light in the dust. I'd grab the flashlight, climb out in my socks, check every inch. Always clean, but I'd stand there in the sodium lights, looking at the empty space where those prints used to be, feeling watched from just out of sight. The old boys at the mill didn't laugh when I finally told one of them, just nodded slow, eyes on their coffee, said those back roads border places folks used to live before the park took the land. Cabins long rotted, families that never left the woods proper. Some things right along quiet, marking what's theirs, curious about where we're going in such a hurry. I don't know what it wanted, to be seen, to come with me, or just to remind me that the high ground up there ain't always empty. These days I keep my trailer spotless, wash at every stop, but dust still settles. And sometimes when I'm loaded heavy and rolling through mountain passes at dusk, I'll feel that old weight settle on head, light, patient, waiting for the next long night when I forget to check. I never forget anymore, but part of me wonders if it matters. Some riders don't need permission. They just wait for the dust to settle fresh, then walk their claim again, soft and bare, marking territory one quiet haul at a time. And when I'm old and can't climb up to check anymore, I reckon those prints will still be there every morning, deeper each time, walking the length like they own it. Maybe they do.
I can still hear that howl sometimes when the rain comes down hard and the wind moves through the pines just right. A low throb in my chest that no amount of years and miles has managed to shake loose. It was late October, 2014, one of those nights in the North Georgia mountains where the rain doesn't fall so much as it hangs in the air, heavy and relentless, turning the windshield into a moving curtain of water no matter how fast the wipers slap. I was running empty back toward Dalton after dropping a load of furniture blanks at a warehouse in Blue Ridge, taking the old state route that cuts through the Chattahoochee National Forest because it shaved 20 minutes off the interstate, and I was bone tired and ready to be home. The road was narrow blacktop, patched and repatched, with sharp drop-offs on the passenger side plunging down into ravines I couldn't see but could hear rushing with runoff. My headlights carved out a short tunnel ahead, reflecting off wet leaves and the occasional ribbon of fog drifting across the asphalt. I had the radio low, some Atlanta station fading in and out with bluegrass, and the heater blowing warm against the chill seeping through the door seals. The rig was light without a trailer, bouncy on the curves, and I was taking them careful because the shoulders were soft, and I'd seen more than one trucker end up nose down in a creek after hydroplaning on nights like that. I was maybe 10 miles south of Suches, deep in the national forest where there's no houses, no cell signal, no nothing but trees pressing in close, when I heard it the first time. A howl. Not a coyote yip or a dog barking distant. Something deeper, fuller, rising from a human throat but gone wild, ragged at the edges like it had forgotten how words fit together. It started low behind me, echoing off the ridges, then rolled forward until it felt like it was coming from right alongside the truck, out in the dark on the driver's side. I eased off the gas, listening. The rain kept drumming the cab roof. The wipers kept their steady slap, but underneath it all that howl hung in the air, mournful and searching. I told myself it was an animal. Had to be. Maybe a big dog somebody dumped, or a wolf hybrid somebody let run loose. Folks do stupid things up here. But it didn't sound right. Too much chest behind it. Too much ache. It faded as I rounded a curve, swallowed by the rain and the rush of water in the ditches. I turned the radio up a notch, took a sip of cold coffee from the thermos, and tried to put it out of my mind. A mile or two later it came again, closer this time, starting somewhere behind and moving up alongside like whatever made it was keeping pace with me through the trees. The howl rose and fell, not angry, not threatening, just calling, long and drawn out, vibrating through the glass. I glanced left into the dark, saw nothing but rain and trunks flashing past. The road straightened for a short stretch, and the howl matched me there, running parallel maybe 50 yards off in the woods, steady as my engine. My skin prickled. I pressed the accelerator a little harder, tires hissing on the wet pavement. The next time it sounded, it was ahead. I crested a small rise, and there it was, rolling back toward me from somewhere down the road, deep and lonely, echoing between the ridges until it felt like the mountains themselves were giving voice to it. I downshifted coming into a curve, slowed more than I needed to, and the howl adjusted, fading slightly, then picking up again on the straight, always the same distance, always matching my speed. It wasn't chasing, it was traveling with me. I started talking to myself low, the way you do when you're alone too long. Told myself it was echo, sound bouncing weird off the wet rock faces. Told myself I was tired. The 3 days on the road had me hearing things. But every time the road opened up, the howl was there beside me, or just ahead, patient, never hurried. Rain hammered harder, drumming loud enough to drown most noises, but that sound cut through clear, human-throated and wild. About 15 miles in, I couldn't stand it anymore. There's a wide pool-off near Woody Cap, gravel overlook with a view down into the valley on clear days. That night it was just a patch of wet stone disappearing into white rain. I eased the truck over, set the brakes, killed the headlights, and let the engine idle. Darkness rushed in instant, broken only by the soft glow of the dash and the red marker lights. I rolled the window down an inch to listen better. Rain pattered on the roof, runoff gurgled in the ditch, wind moved through the treetops high overhead. Nothing else, no how, just silence so complete it rang in my ears. I sat there 5 minutes, maybe 10, breathing slow, telling myself it was gone. Whatever it was had lost interest when I stopped moving. I reached for the headlight switch, clicked them back on, and the howl started again, immediate and close, coming from somewhere down the road ahead, deeper this time, almost sorrowful, like it had been waiting for me to listen. My hand froze on the wheel. The sound rose, held, then rolled back toward me through the rain, passing alongside the truck again before fading into the dark behind. I didn't wait, shifted into gear, pulled out fast enough to spit gravel, headlights cutting wild as I swung back onto the pavement. I drove faster than I should have on that wet road, taking curves tight, tires squealing soft on the slick. The howl picked up right away, matching me again, sometimes beside, sometimes ahead, always there when the road straightened. I pushed the old Freightliner hard, 60 on the straights, 50 through the curves, praying I wouldn't meet a deer or a washed-out shoulder. The rain eased some but never stopped, mist rising off the warm asphalt now, turning the headlights hazy. Every mile I expected Howl to fall behind, but it didn't. It kept pace easy, voice carrying through the storm like it belonged to the mountains themselves. I stopped looking left into the trees, stopped checking the mirrors for shapes running alongside. Just drove, knuckles white, jaw clenched, trying to outrun a sound. The road finally started dropping toward Dalanega, ridges falling away, trees thinning as civilization crept back in. A stray porch light here and there, then a gas station glowing lonely at a crossroads. The howl thinned with the forest, growing faint on the longer straights, until I hit the 4-lane just north of town and it stopped altogether. I rolled the windows down to let the rain-washed air in,
turned the radio up loud, anything to fill the cab with normal noise. I didn't stop till I reached the house in Dalton, pulled into the drive just as the rain quit and the sky started going gray with dawn, sat in the cab a long minute, listening to water drip off the eaves, half expecting the howl to drift in from the woods behind the neighborhood. It didn't, just morning birds starting tentative, a dog barking distant. I never told my wife the whole of it, said the roads were bad, that I'd driven careful, but she saw something in my face, asked if I was all right. I nodded, went inside, showered until the hot water ran out, slept the day through with the curtains drawn. I avoided that route after that, took the interstate even when it added an hour, stuck to daylight when I could. But some nights, when the rain sets in heavy, and I'm out on some other lonely road, I'll hear it again, faint at first, then stronger, a deep wild howl matching my speed through the dark. I turn the radio louder, drive faster, keep my eyes on the pavement. It always fades when the trees thin out. The old boys at the terminal didn't laugh when I finally mentioned it one slow morning over coffee. One of them, gray-haired fella who'd hauled moonshine back in the day, just nodded slow. Said those mountains hold echoes of folks who got lost or left on purpose. Hunters, deserters, families hiding from the world. Some never stopped calling for company. They wait for a night when the rain carries sound far, wait for a truck rolling slow enough to hear. I don't know what it wanted, to be heard, to follow, or just to remind me that the woods remember every soul that passes through alone. I still drive for a living, still take mountain runs when the money's right, but when the rain starts falling hard and the road narrows into forest, I keep the windows up tight and the speed steady, and I never pull over to listen anymore, because some howls aren't meant to be answered. They just travel alongside, patient as the ridges, waiting for the next lonely driver who slows down long enough to wonder what's calling from the dark. I wonder still, and on the worst nights, when the rain drums steady and the miles stretch empty, I think it wonders about me too.
I remember that night like it was etched into the back of my eyelids. The kind of memory that creeps up on you when you're alone in the dark, whispering doubts into your ear. It was late fall, the leaves turning that bruised shade of red and orange up in the hollers of West Virginia, where the mountains fold in on themselves like old secrets nobody wants to dig up. I'd been driving back from my cousin's place in Charleston, helping him fix up his trailer after a bad storm tore through. He lived way out in the sticks, the kind of place where cell service drops off like it's afraid to follow you too far. I should have left earlier, but we got to talking about family, our grandpap who used to tell stories about the woods, how they weren't just trees, but something alive, watching. "Don't go cutting through the back roads after dark," he'd say, his voice gravelly from years of chewing tobacco. "Them hills got eyes that ain't friendly." I laughed it off back then, but that night it didn't feel so funny. The drive home to my little apartment in Huntington was supposed to be straightforward, but I took a wrong turn somewhere past the Kanawha River, trying to shave off time. My old Ford pickup rattled along these narrow, winding roads that snaked through the Appalachians like veins in a giant's arm. No streetlights out there, just the occasional flicker from a distant cabin window, yellow and lonely against the black. The air was crisp, smelling like wet earth and pine, and I'd cracked the window to stay awake, letting the chill bite at my face. Radio was static mostly, but I caught snippets of some preacher talking about Judgment Day, his voice fading in and out like a bad dream. I was tired, bone deep from hauling lumber all day, and the dashboard clock glowed 1:47 a.m. Figured I'd pull over at the next rest stop, but there weren't any, not in these parts. Just endless forest pressing in on both sides, the trees so thick they swallowed the moonlight. It started subtle, the way these things do. My headlights swept across the undergrowth as I rounded a bend, and something caught the beam. Eyes. Just a pair at first, low to the ground, reflecting that greenish yellow like a cat's, but bigger. I thought deer, maybe, or coons scavenging. But then another pair, 10 feet away, and another after that. Dozens of them, strung out along the roadside brush for what felt like miles. They weren't bunched up like animals would be, too spaced out, too deliberate. I eased off the gas a bit, peering out the window, my heart picking up a notch. Animals move, right? They scatter or freeze, but these eyes just stared back, unblinking, locked on my truck as I crept by. No rustling in the leaves, no sounds of paws on gravel, just that glow, hovering there in the dark. I shook my head, telling myself it was nothing, probably foxes or something, hyped up on my own exhaustion. But the road kept twisting, and those eyes kept appearing. Every few yards, another said, low and steady. I counted maybe 20 before I stopped counting, my palms getting slick on the wheel. The forest here was old, the kind where the trees twist up like they're in pain, roots buckling the asphalt in places.
I'd heard tales from locals about pharaoh folks living out in these woods, people who'd gone off the grid generations ago, shunning towns and electricity. Grandpap used to whisper about them over campfires, calling them shadow people or holler ghosts, but he meant real flesh and blood outcasts, surviving on what the land gave and what they could steal. They guard their trails, he'd say, and if you see 'em, you best keep moving. I never believed it, not really. Urban legends, right? But out there, alone, with the night closing in, doubt started gnawing at me. The eyes didn't waver. I slowed the truck more, down to maybe 15 miles an hour, straining to see beyond the glow. That's when it happened. One pair rose up, slow and deliberate, like whatever owned them was standing from a crouch. Not animal height anymore, human height, maybe 5 or 6 feet. The beam caught a glimpse of something, pale skin, ragged cloth hanging off a thin frame, partially hidden in the brambles. Not clear, just enough to make my stomach twist. Then another set rose, and another, figures emerging from the undergrowth, standing stock still, eyes fixed on me. They weren't crossing the road, weren't approaching, just watching, tracking me as I passed. I could feel it, that prickling on the back of my neck, like being sized up by predators who knew they had all night. I hit the gas a little, but not too much. The road was treacherous, potholes that could snap an axle if you weren't careful. My mind raced, trying to rationalize. Hunters, poachers out at night, but no gear, no lights of their own, and the way they stood so evenly spaced, like sentinels along a border. The truck's engine hummed lower as we picked up speed, but those eyes kept pace somehow, appearing ahead in the brush, never falling behind. Parallel to me, always just off the road, hidden enough that I couldn't make out faces or details, but close enough to know they were there. I rolled up the window, the chill suddenly feeling like fingers on my skin. The radio cut out completely, leaving only the rumble of tires and my own breathing, ragged now. Memories flooded tight as I drove, unbidden. Growing up in these mountains, you'd hear whispers in the diners or at church potlucks, folks gone missing on hikes, cabins found abandoned with doors clawed from the inside, strange howls that weren't wolves. One story stuck with me. A logger back in the 70s who swore he saw people in the woods, feral and wild, eyes glowing in his lantern light. He quit the next day, moved to the city, but they said he never slept right again. They're guardians, the old-timers would mutter, keeping outsiders from the deep trails where the real secrets are buried. Coal mines long collapsed, forgotten graves, maybe even worse. I glanced in the rear view, half expecting to see shapes loping after me, but there was only darkness swallowing the road behind. The eyes multiplied. What started as dozens felt like hundreds now, lining both sides of the road as it dipped into a valley. I could hear things then, faint at first, like whispers carried on the wind or branches snapping under careful feet. Not loud, not aggressive, but enough to make me question if it was the truck or something else. I turned off the heater, straining to listen, but that only made the silence heavier, broken by those subtle cracks and rustles. My phone was dead, no signal anyway, and the GPS had glitched out miles back, leaving me navigating by faded road signs half overgrown with kudzu. Isolation hit me hard then, the kind that makes your chest tight. No other cars, no houses for what felt like eternity, just me, the truck, and whatever was out there in the undergrowth. I tried to focus on the road, gripping the wheel until my knuckles whitened, but curiosity, or stupidity, got the better of me. I flicked on the high beams, sweeping them across the brush. There they were, more figures, gaunt and motionless, their eyes catching the light like mirrors. One was closer than the others, maybe 20 feet off the shoulder, partially obscured by ferns. I got a flash of matted hair, dirt-streaked skin, clothes that looked like they'd been pieced together from old saps and hides. No expression I could see, just that stare, unyielding. It didn't move as I passed, but its head turned slowly, following. A chill ran through me, deeper than the night air. These weren't drifters or kids playing pranks. They felt ancient, tied to the land in a way I couldn't grasp. Panic started bubbling up. What if they stepped out? What if they blocked the road ahead? I imagined it, the truck surrounded, hands reaching through the windows, dragging me into the woods where no one would find me. Stories of abductions, bodies discovered months later, not by animals or worse. But they didn't cross, they just tracked me, parallel, a silent escort through their territory. I whispered to myself, keep driving, just keep driving. The road climbed now, switchbacks that made my stomach lurch, but the eyes persisted, adapting to the terrain, always there in the periphery. Hours dragged on, or maybe it was minutes. Time warps in fear like that. My mind wandered to my life back home, the mundane safety of it, girlfriend waiting, job at the warehouse, beers with buddies on weekends. All that felt distant, fragile, like it could vanish if these watchers decided otherwise. I thought about turning around, but the road was one way in places, cliffs dropping off sharp, no choice but forward. The whispers grew, definite now, low murmurs that could be wind or voices, indistinct words blending with the leaves. Go, away, hours, or maybe my imagination. Dread built like a storm, heavy and oppressive, making every shadow suspect. Then, a break in the trees, a clearing with an old cabin off to the side, boards turning gray, windows dark like empty sockets. I considered stopping, banging on the door for help, but something stopped me. Eyes gleamed from the tree line around it, more figures standing sentinel. Not abandoned then. Theirs. I sped past, hard hammering. The road narrowed further, branches scraping the truck like claws. Eyes closer now, some rising as I approached, others already standing.
I could almost feel their breath on the glass, though they never touched the road. Exhaustion mixed with terror, making my vision blur. I talked to myself aloud, voice shaky. They're just people, lost or something, not going to hurt you. But the legends echoed. Feral clans descended from miners who went mad in the dark, or escaped convicts breeding in isolation, guarding trails from intruders, warning with their presence. Passers like me, stumbling into forbidden ground. The eyes drived relentlessly, a living fence guiding me through. Dawn crept in slow, gray light filtering through the canopy. The eyes began to fade, one pair at a time, sinking back into the brush as the sun rose. By full light, they were gone, the forest innocent again, birds chirping like nothing happened. I pulled over at the first gas station, hands trembling as I filled the tank. Told the attendant about it, but Ephus nodded, eyes distant. Folks see things out there, best not to linger. Drove home in a daze, but the memory lingers, a shadow in my rear view. Sometimes at night I hear rustles outside, see glows in the dark. Were they warning me, or waiting for the next time I stray too far? I don't drive those roads anymore, but I wonder if they're still out there, eyes low in the undergrowth, guarding what's theirs. The fear never quite leaves, a quiet sorrow for the wild places we pretend aren't watching back.
I still get a cold sweat every time I think about that drive back from my sister's place in Beckley, back in the fall of '98, when the leaves were turning and the nights came down quick like a curtain. She'd been having a rough go of it after her husband walked out, leaving her with 3 young'uns and a mortgage she couldn't hardly keep up with. I'd gone down to help patch the roof on her old farmhouse, the one our parents left her when they passed, way out where the pavement gives up and the gravel takes over. We spent the day up on ladders, nailing shingles and talking about better times. But as the sun dipped behind the ridges, I knew I had to head home to my own little place up near Elkins. "You sure you don't want to stay the night?" she asked, worry in her eyes. I told her I'd be fine, that I'd driven these mountain roads 1,000 times. Famous last words, I reckon. The route I took was the back way, the one folks call Old Route 33 before they straightened it out with the new highway. It's narrower, twistier, cuts through hollers so deep the moonlight barely touches the asphalt. No guardrails in most spots, just sheer drops on one side and rock faces on the other, overgrown with rhododendron and laurel thick as walls. I liked it better that way, quieter, fewer trucks barreling through. My old Chevy pickup was running good that night, heater blowing warm against the chill seeping in. Radio was picking up a faint signal from a station out of Richwood playing bluegrass, the kind our grandpap used to hum while whittling on the porch. I had a thermos of coffee and a pack of smokes, figuring I'd make it home by midnight if I kept a steady pace. It was around 10 when things started feeling off. The road hugs the side of Little Birch Mountain there, one sharp curve after another, the kind where you slow down or end up in the creek below. I came around one of those blind turns, headlights sweeping the rock wall, and that's when it happened. A heavy thud right on the windshield. Sounded like a bowling ball dropped from heaven. The glass spiderwebbed in front of my face, a big starburst crack spreading out from the center, but it held, safety glass doing its job. I slammed on the brakes, heart jumping into my throat, truck fishtailing a bit on the damp leaves. "What in the hell?" I muttered, staring at the damage. There was a rock, fist-sized maybe, sitting on the hood where it bounced off. Gray limestone, sharp edges, the kind you find all over these hills. I sat there a minute, breathing hard, trying to figure it out. No overhang above the road here. This stretch was cut into the hillside, trees growing right up to the edge, no cliffs hanging over, and no vehicles ahead of me. I'd been alone for the last hour, no taillights, no nothing. Kids, maybe, throwing rocks from the bank? But it was late, cold out, and this far out there weren't any houses close. I eased the truck forward, glass creaking a little with the movement, and kept my eyes peeled. The crack obscured part of my view, but I could see enough. Told myself it was just a fluke. Maybe a chunk fell from higher up somehow, even though I knew better. Didn't have to wait long for confirmation it wasn't. A couple miles on, another curve. This one sharper, the road dipping down toward a hollow, and thunk, something smaller hit the passenger side of the windshield. Not as hard, but enough to make me swerve. This rock was pebble-sized, bounced off and rolled away. I caught a glimpse of it in the mirror as it tumbled into the ditch. My hands tightened on the wheel, knuckles white. 2 rocks now, no explanation. The bluegrass on the radio faded to static, like even it didn't want to stick around. I reached over and shut it off, preferring the silence. Though silence out here ain't ever truly silent. Crickets, wind in the trees, the occasional hoot of an owl. But tonight, it felt heavier, watchful. I should have turned around right then, headed back to my sister's, but that would have added hours, and part of me didn't want to admit I was spooked. These are my mountains. I grew up roaming them, hunting ginseng and morels with my daddy. Nothing out here I couldn't handle. That's what I told myself. But the further I went, the more uneasy I got. The road was littered now, scattered rocks here and there, some small, some bigger, like someone had been tossing them out onto the asphalt. Fresh too, no moss or dirt on the bottoms, and just clean. I slowed way down, weaving around them, tires crunching over gravel.
way these fell naturally. Someone put them there or threw them. That's when I heard it, the first rustle. Off to my right, up the bank in the thick underbrush, branches moving against the wind, a quick snap like a foot stepping wrong. I hit the high beams, sweeping them across the tree line, but nothing. Just shadows dancing between the trunks. My mouth went dry. I'd heard stories all my life about folks living wild in these woods. Feral people, they called them. Families that went into the hollers generations ago and never came out, surviving on what they could trap or grow. Miners who got lost in the caves, or moonshiners hiding from revenue men, their kin turning strange over the years. Grandpap swore he'd seen signs, snares set for deer that could take a man's leg off, cabins so overgrown you wouldn't know they were there till you stepped on the roof. He told one tale about a surveyor back in the 50s who had his Jeep stoned on this very road, windows shattered, had to floor it out with glass flying everywhere, found scratches on the paint later like fingernails dragging along the sides. They don't like intruders, Grandpap said, spitting tobacco juice into the fire. Mark their territory with rocks, warn you off before they do worse. I always figured it was just talk, meant to keep us kids from wandering too far, but now with the windshield cracked and rocks under my tires, it didn't feel like stories anymore. I pulled over then, couldn't help it, needed to clear the road ahead if I was going to keep going. The bigger rocks were piling up in places, enough to puncture a tire or worse. I left the engine running, headlights on, and grabbed the flashlight from under the seat. Stepped out cautious, boots crunching on the asphalt. The air was cold, smelled like damp earth and decaying leaves, that rich mountain scent that usually comforted me but tonight just felt oppressive. I started kicking rocks off to the side, bending to pick up the larger ones, tossing them into the ditch. My breath came out in puffs, and every little sound made me jump, the trip of water from a culvert, a leaf skittering across the road. That's when the rustles came again, louder, from both sides now, like multiple things moving back in the trees. I froze, flashlight beam cutting through the dark, catching trunks and branches but nothing else. Then movement, quick shadows retreating deeper into the woods, figures I couldn't quite make out, tall, thin, hunched maybe, slipping between the trees like they knew every root and rock. Not animals, the way they moved was too upright, too deliberate. People. My skin crawled, that primal feeling of being watched, hunted even. I shone the light toward the noise, but they were gone, melted back into the undergrowth. No calls, no yells, just silent withdrawal. I hurried then, clearing the road faster, heart pounding in my ears, tossed the last big rock and jumped back in the truck, locking the doors even though I knew how foolish that was out here. They weren't coming for the truck. They were warning me, stoning the path like the old tale said, marking territory, telling me to turn back. But turn back to what? Hours of driving to maybe find a way around? No, forward was the only way. I eased the truck ahead, slower now, watching the banks on both sides. The rustles followed for a stretch, parallel to the road, keeping pace without showing themselves. Branches snapping, leaves shuffling under feet that knew how to move quiet, but not quite enough. Memories kept bubbling up as I drove. Daddy warning me never to hike alone in certain hollers, places where trails just ended and folks disappeared. A cousin who went missing for 3 days when we were kids, came back scratched up and mute, wouldn't talk about it for years. Finally admitted he'd seen people watching him from the ridges, throwing stones to herd him back out. Eyes everywhere, he said, voice hollow. But they let me go, guess I wasn't worth keeping. I never pressed him after that. Some things you leave buried. The road climbed higher, switchbacks that made the engine strain, and the attacks, if that's what they were, eased off. No more thuds on the glass, though I flinched at every shadow. But the rocks on the road persisted, scattered like breadcrumbs leading me on, or hurting me. I started wondering if this was their land, some forgotten claim before the coal companies or the Park Service drew lines on maps, places where the forest took back what was hers, and the people in it with her. Isolation does things to folks, cuts them off from the world, makes them protective, feral. I'd seen it in old hermits, but this felt deeper, like blood memory. An hour or so later, maybe more, time blurs when a face got hold. I passed an old pull-off, one of those spots where loggers used to park. There was a cabin back in there, half collapsed, roof gave in years ago, vines crawling over it like fingers. My headlights caught something as I went by. Fresh rocks piled at the entrance, deliberately blocking the door, and movement again, figures starting from the clearing into the trees more than before. I didn't stop, didn't dare, just pressed the gas a little harder, glass creaking in protest. The dread built slow, like fog rolling in from the valleys. Every curve I expected another rock, bigger maybe, through the weakened windshield right into my face, or worse, them stepping out, blocking the way. But they didn't, they just watched from the edges, rustling as I passed, retreating deeper when I looked. Morning shots, that's all, stoned for intruding like the old surveyors or hunters who strayed too far. I thought about my sister, waiting for a call that I made it home safe. My own bed, the normalcy of it all, felt so far away now, fragile. As the night wore on, the road finally started to open up, trees thinning as I crested the ridge. The rustles faded behind me, no more rocks appearing ahead. Dawn was still hours off, but the pressure eased like I'd crossed some invisible line. I drove wary the rest of the way, jumping at shadows, but nothing else came. Pulled in my driveway just as the sky was graying, hands shaking as I lit a cigarette on the porch. Never told many people the full story. My sister believes part of it, nods knowingly. She's heard the tales too, but I avoid that stretch of road now, take the long way even at Ad's time. Sometimes when the wind picks up and the leaves rustle just right, I hear it again, that snap of branches, the whisper of movement retreating. Were they protecting something back there? An old still, a burial ground, or just their way of life? I'll never know, but the crack in that old windshield, I never got it fixed, left it as a reminder. Some territories ain't meant for passing through, and the mountains have their own way of letting you know. I still wonder if they watch from the tree line sometimes, waiting to see if I'll forget and come back. Lord willing, I never will.
I don't talk about that night much anymore. Not because folks wouldn't believe me. Plenty around here have their own tales. But because saying it out loud brings it all rushing back. The way the fog clings to the hollers after a rain. It was early winter, December, I think, back in 2012, when the roads ice over quick and the trees stand bare like skeletons against the sky. I'd been down in Logan helping my uncle clear out his old place after he passed sudden from a heart attack. He was the last of that generation, lived alone in a little cinder block house tucked back off County Route 10, the one that winds along the Wyandotte River before climbing up into the real mountains. We spent 2 days boxing up his things, faded photos of people I barely remembered, jars of nails and screws, his hunting rifles he kept oiled even when he couldn't hunt no more. By the time I loaded the last box into my Dodge and said goodbye to the empty house, it was pushing 9 o'clock and dark as bitch. The drive home to Princeton should have been simple enough, but I always took the old roads when I could, the ones that cut through the heart of the coal country, past abandoned tipples and hollowed-out towns where the stores are boarded up and the porches sag. Something about them feels honest, like they're still holding on to the way things used to be. That night, the temperature was dropping fast, frost already sparkling on the windshield when I cranked the heat. I had a thermos of coffee gone cold hours ago, and the radio flickering between gospel stations and static. The road was empty, no other headlights for miles, just my high beams cutting tunnels through the blackness, and the occasional reflectors blinking back like eyes. It started on one of those blind curves, the kind carved into the hillside where the mountain leans over you on one side and the drop-off waits on the other. You learn quick out here to honk going into them, old habit from when the coal trucks ruled these roads, letting whoever might be coming the other way know you're there. So I laid on the horn, 2 quick blasts, sharp and clear. The sound bounced off the rock face and came rolling back, echoing down the holler like it always does. But something was wrong with the return. It wasn't quite right, off-key somehow, the tone stretched and mocking, like someone trying to imitate me but getting it just twisted enough to make your skin crawl. I let off the horn and frowned, figuring it was the cold playing tricks on the sound waves, or maybe the way the wind was whipping through the trees. I eased around the curve slow, watching for ice, and forgot about it for a minute. The road straightened out into a long stretch bordered by thick woods, pines and hemlocks crowding close, their branches heavy with the first threat of snow. Everything was quiet again, except for the hum of the engine and the tires on the asphalt. Then, without me touching a thing, it came from the woods, a horn blast. Same pitch as mine, but wrong again, drawn out and raspy at the edges, like it was being made with a throat instead of a horn. It sounded close, maybe 50 yards off in the trees to my right, and it echoed just like mine had, bouncing between the ridges. I jumped so hard my coffee sloshed in the cup holder. My own horn was silent. I checked, hand hovering over the wheel. Nothing. I told myself it was another driver somewhere up ahead, maybe paralleling me on a side road I couldn't see. These mountains are full of old logging trails and fire roads that twist around like veins. Could be somebody messing with me, though out here that seemed unlikely. Folks don't play pranks at night in the winter. They hunker down. I kept driving, a little faster now, watching the tree line. The road curved again, gentler this time, and I resisted the urge to honk, didn't want to hear that mockery come back. Then it sounded again, 2 blasts this time, from deeper in the woods but still keeping pace with me. Same off tone, like a voice trying to shape itself into something mechanical and failing just enough to unsettle. It wasn't an echo anymore. It was answering, calling. I felt the hairs on my neck stand up, that old feeling you get when you're hunting and realize you're not the only one doing the watching. My uncle used to talk about things in these woods, things that lived way back in the hollers where even the game wardens don't go. Mimics, he called them once after a few bowls of moonshine. Old families gone wild, or maybe something older. They learn your sounds, use them to draw you off the path. I laughed then, same as I laughed at most of his stories, but he'd get quiet after, staring into the fire like he was seeing something I couldn't. The blasts kept coming, unprompted now, one from the left side, then the right, circling the truck like they were surrounding me. I'd catch glimpses of movement in the beams, branches swaying against the wind, or maybe something ducking just out of sight. The sound would come from ahead sometimes, further up the road, luring almost like it wanted me to follow, to speed up into the next curve. I didn't. I kept steady, hands tight on the wheel, refusing to answer back. But the silence felt worse somehow, heavy with waiting. Every mile or so it'd start again. Short honks, long ones, emergency blasts like someone in trouble. All twisted, all wrong, coming from the dark between the trees. I started thinking about the stories I'd heard growing up, the ones whispered around kitchen tables when the power went out.
Truckers who vanished on these back roads, their rigs found wrecked at the bottom of ravines with no skid marks, like they'd just driven straight off. Search parties finding nothing but echoes when they called out names. One tale stuck particular, a man from Man who heard his own wife's voice calling from the woods one night, begging him to pull over, saying she was hurt. He did, and they never found him, just his truck, door open, coffee still warm. They learn your voice, the old folks said, learn your sounds, draw you in. I never believed it till that night, till I heard my own horn thrown back at me from throats that shouldn't know how. The road climbed higher, switchbacks that made the engine labor, and the mimicking got bolder. Sometimes it'd sound right on the edge of the shoulder, so close I swore I could hear breathing mixed in with the blast. Other times it'd fade back deep into the hollers, faint and mournful, like whatever was making it was testing how far I could reach. I turned the radio up loud, some preacher shouting about salvation, anything to drown it out, but the signal kept cutting, and the horn would slip through the static. I thought about my uncle then, how he'd be gone a week before anyone found him, sitting in his chair like he just dozed off, how alone he'd been at the end. Made me wonder if something had called to him too, in the quiet of that little house. There was this one stretch where the road runs along a ridge, sheer drop on one side and a wall of rock on the other, pines growing right up to the asphalt. The mimicking stopped there for a while, and the silence felt almost worse, like it was waiting for me to relax. I didn't. I kept my eyes forward, foot steady on the gas. Then just as I rounded a bend, it came from right ahead, 2 urgent blasts, like a warning for an ongoing vehicle. My instinct kicked in before I could think. I hit the brakes hard, tires squealing on the frost. The truck slid a little, heart slamming against my ribs, expecting headlights to come barreling on the curve. But there was nothing. Empty road stretching out, moonlight glinting off the ice patches, no one coming, just the echo of that false warning hanging in the air. That's when the fear really took hold, cold and deep. Whatever was out there knew these roads, knew how we drive them, knew exactly what sounds would make a man react. It wasn't random anymore, it was deliberate, luring, trying to run me off the edge or draw me to stop. I eased back on the gas, slower now, every muscle tense. The mimicking started again behind me, fainter, like it was disappointed I'd seen through the trick, but it didn't stop. It kept pace for miles, sometimes close, sometimes far, always that same mocking tone. I passed a few old cabins along the way, set back from the road and dark as graves. One had a rusted truck out front, vines growing through the windows like it hadn't moved in decades. For a second I thought about pulling in, banging on a door for help, but something stopped me. These places out here, some of them aren't empty even when they look it. Folks live quiet, keep to themselves, and strangers at night aren't welcome. Besides, the mimicking seemed to swell when I slowed near them, like whatever was making the sound didn't want me stopping there either, hurting me maybe, keeping me moving toward whatever waited deeper in. Hours passed like that, or maybe it was less. Fear warps time, something fierce. The cold seeped in despite the heater, and my hands went numb on the wheel. I started talking to myself, low and steady, anything to hear a real human voice. Told myself it was just people, feral maybe, living off the grid like so many do. Descendants of miners or moonshiners who'd gone too far back into the mountains and never came out all the way human. They learned to imitate sounds, birds, animals, machinery, to hunt or to warn, or to draw prey in. That's what I told myself, better than thinking about the older stories, the ones Grandma hushed when we kids were around. As the night wore on toward morning, the mimicking gradually faded. The last blast came faint, far back in the trees, almost sorrowful, like whatever it was knew the game was ending. The sky started graying in the east, that thin winter light that makes everything look washed out and tired. I crested the last big ridge, and the road opened up, civilization creeping back in, a scattered house here and there with porch lights glowing, then the glow of Princeton in the distance. The sound stopped entirely then, swallowed by the coming day. I pulled over at the first gas station I saw, hand shaking as I filled the tank I didn't need. The attendant, an older fellow with tired eyes, noticed me staring off into the trees across the road. Rough night, he asked. I started to tell him, but the words stuck. He just nodded like he already knew. Best not to answer back, he said quiet. Some things out there just want you to follow the sound. I drove home after that, crawled into bed still dressed, and slept till noon. I avoid those back roads now, especially at night, take the interstate even when it's longer. But sometimes when the wind comes down off the mountains just right, I swear I hear it, a distant horn blast, off-key and mocking, calling from the dark. I don't answer, I never will, but I wonder if it remembers me, if it's still out there waiting for someone to honk back, to follow the sound into the trees where the road ends and something else begins. My uncle's old house is empty now, sold to some out-of-stater who'll never know what lingers in these hollers. Some nights I think about him hearing that same call in his final days, alone with the quiet. Makes me sad more than scared. The mountains keep their secrets close, and some sounds aren't meant for us to answer.
I still don't stop at pull-offs anymore. Not the little gravel ones tucked back in the hollers where the cell signal dies and the trees lean in like they're listening. I learned that the hard way one October evening back in 22, driving home from my cousin's place up near Boone. The sun was dropping fast behind the ridges, turning everything that bruised purple color it gets right before full dark. And I'd had a couple beers with supper. Nothing heavy, just enough to make the curves feel a little softer. My bladder, though, wasn't feeling soft at all. I'd been holding it for the last 20 miles, and when I saw that little unmarked pull-off coming up on the right, half swallowed by laurels, I didn't think twice. I flicked the blinker out of habit, even though there wasn't another soul on that road, and eased my old Ford onto the gravel. The spot wasn't much, just a wide place scraped out of the bank years ago, maybe for log trucks or hunters, with a rusted iron pipe sticking up where a trash barrel used to be. No picnic table, no sign, no outhouse. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that presses on your ears after the engine cuts off. Pines crowded right up to the edge, and the air smelled like wet leaves and cold stone. I left the headlights on for a minute while I stepped out to piss against the far bank, steam rising off the ground in the chill. That's when I first felt it. Eyes on me. Not the nervous little prickling you get from a deer watching from the brush. This was heavier, like somebody standing right behind you, breathing on your neck, but when you turn, there's nothing there. I shook off, zipped up, and told myself it was just the beer in the dark playing tricks. Happens all the time up here. You spend enough nights in these mountains, you start seeing shapes that ain't there. I climbed back in the truck, killed the headlights, and sat a minute letting my eyes adjust. The moon was coming up thin over the ridge, silver in the treetops. I figured I'd give it 5 minutes, let the coffee work its way out of me, then get back on the road. Home wasn't but another hour if I kept a steady foot. That's when I saw the movement. At first I thought it was a coon or maybe a dog crossing the far edge of the gravel, but it didn't move right. It came upright, slow, like a man standing up from a crouch he'd been holding for a long time. A figure, tallish, in clothes that looked dark and ragged against the trees. It stepped out into the open, right at the tree line, maybe 40 yards off, and raised one arm. A wave. Not a friendly howdy wave, more like somebody flagging down help on a desert highway. Slow, deliberate, palm forward. I rolled the window down a crack. Cold air rushed in, smelling of leaf mold and something sharper I couldn't place. "You all right?" I called. My voice sounded small out there, swallowed quick by the woods. The figure waved again, same motion, and took a step closer. Then another, not hurried, just steady like it had all night. I couldn't make out a face yet, too much shadow, but the shape looked human enough. Jeans, maybe a jacket that hung loose. I thought maybe a hiker twisted an ankle, or somebody whose truck broke down farther back on one of the logging roads. Happens. Folks get turned around in these hollers and wander till they drop. I left the engine idling and stepped out again, boots crunching on the gravel. "Hey, you need a ride or something?" I kept my voice friendly, but not too loud. You learn quick not to spook folks who might be hurt or half crazy from exposure. It kept coming. 25 yards now. I could hear its footsteps. Soft, almost no sound at all on the leaves, like it knew exactly where to place its weight. I reached back into cab and clicked the brights on, aiming the beam straight at it. That's when things started feeling wrong. The light hit it full, and it didn't squint or raise a hand to shield its eyes like a normal person would. It just kept walking, steady, into the glare. The clothes were worse than I thought. Tattered flannel shirt hanging open, no undershirt. Skin pale as creekstone. Arms too long, maybe, or the sleeves too short. Hard to tell. But the face, Lord, the face. I ain't proud of this, but my stomach dropped like I'd step off a ledge. The features weren't right. Not deformed exactly. Not like some poor soul born wrong or burned in a fire. More like they'd been smoothed over. The skin looked soft, almost waxy, stretched too tight against the bones. Eyes were just dark hollows, no shine, no white. Mouth a straight slash that didn't move when it should have been breathing hard from walking. It was still waving, that same motion, but now it felt less like asking for help and more like beckoning. I backed up till my hips hit the truck door. "Stay there," I said, louder than I meant to. "Just stay right there, all right? I'll call somebody." I fumbled for my phone, thumbed the screen. No bars, of course. I was in a dead pocket, deeper than most. It kept coming. 15 yards. 10. I could hear it now. Breathing, but not right. Wet, rattling like lungs full of leaves. And a sound under that, low and steady. Not coming from its throat. Coming from everywhere and nowhere. I don't remember deciding to get back in the truck. I just did. Door slammed, lock punched down, key twisted hard. The engine roared louder than it had any right to in that quiet. I threw it in reverse and mashed the pedal, tires spitting gravel like buckshot. The truck fishtailed, caught, and I swung the wheel till I was pointed back toward the road. I didn't look in the mirror till I hit pavement. It was standing dead center in the pull-off, right where my headlights had been. Not running after me, not moving at all now, just watching. Arms down at its sides, head tilted a little, like a dog trying to figure a noise. The face, if you could call it that, still wrong. Smiling now, I think, or trying to. The mouth had stretched wider, but the eyes stayed empty. I drove too fast the whole way home, taking curves, drum-tired, white-knuckling the wheel. Didn't stop again till I pulled in my own driveway, porch light burning like a beacon. I sat there a long time with the engine ticking itself cool, staring at nothing. My wife come out in her robe, asked what was wrong. I told her I'd seen a deer, almost hit it, lied right to her face. Couldn't find words for the rest. Next few weeks I kept waiting for something, a missing person report on the radio, maybe a story from somebody else who had stopped there. Nothing. I even drove past that pull-off in daylight once, slow, looking for tracks or clothes or any sign.
Gravel was smooth as if nobody had been there in years. No footprints leading into the woods. No trash, no cigarette butts. Just quiet. But I dream about it still. That slow wave. The way the light didn't bounce off its eyes. Sometimes I wake up hearing that wet breathing sound right outside the bedroom window, even though the dogs don't stir. And every time I pass one of those little landmarked pull-offs, there's hundreds of them scattered through these mountains. I feel the truck wanting to slow down, like muscle memory. I fight it, lock my foot on the gas and keep driving. Folks up here talk about skinwalkers, or holdovers from the old Melungeon days, or meth heads gone pharaoh living back in the Laurel Hills. I don't know what I saw, I just know it saw me. And sometimes when the moon's thin and the fog sits low in the valleys, I swear I feel it still watching, waiting patient. Maybe next time I'll be the one needing help, and maybe next time it'll wave a little slower.
I still get a chill every time the fog rolls in thick like that, the kind that sits low in the valleys and turns the world into a gray nothing. It takes me right back to that night in the fall of 2011, driving an empty trailer down through a little-traveled hollow in eastern Tennessee, somewhere between Johnson City and Irwin along Old Route 107. The load had been dropped off hours earlier up in Greenville, pallets of feed for some big hog operation, and I was headed home with the trailer rattling light behind me, looking forward to a hot meal in my own bed. My wife had promised chili and cornbread if I made it back before 10, and the kids would still be up, wanting to hear about the road. I'd taken that shortcut a dozen times before, saved me 40 minutes cutting through the Nollichucky River Gorge, winding along the water where the mountains pinch in close, but I never took it in weather like that again after what happened. Some roads you learn to respect the hard way. The evening had started clear enough, stars sharp overhead when I left the yard in Johnson City. The air was crisp, carrying that first bite of real autumn, the kind that makes you roll the window down just to smell the wood smoke drifting from chimneys. I had the radio on low, some old Hank Williams tune crackling out of Knoxville, and the reg was running sweet after a fresh oil change. 40-foot flatbed, nothing fancy, but she'd hauled me through worse than a little mountain fog. I remember thinking how good it felt to be rolling empty. No weight dragging the brakes on the downgrades, just the easy pull of the engine and the sway of the trailer behind. But as I dropped down into the hollow, the fog came up off the river fast, the way it does in those narrow places where the water runs cold year-round and the ridges trap the damp like a bowl. 1 minute the road was visible a quarter mile ahead, moonlight silvering the asphalt where it hugged the riverbank. The next it was gone, swallowed whole. My headlights just bounced back at me, turning the mist into a glowing wall that seemed to breathe. I slowed to a crawl, 20 miles an hour maybe, hugging what I hoped was the center line because the shoulder dropped straight into the river on one side, black water rushing over rocks you couldn't see, and climbed rocky into the trees on the other, laurel and rhododendron so thick daylight barely touched the ground. No cell signal down there, of course. Hadn't been since I left the ridge. The CB was quiet too, just the occasional pop of static when I keyed the mic to check. I was alone, or so I thought. The only company was the river murmuring somewhere off to my left, low and steady like an old man talking in his sleep. The hollow stretches about 8 miles like that, bottomland squeezed between steep ridges covered in hardwood and laurel thickets that never quite let go of the damp. Houses are few and far between, mostly old farm places set back from the road on little benches carved out 100 years ago. At that hour, every light was out, windows dark, porches empty. Folks down there go to bed with the chickens and rise before the roosters. They don't waste electricity on nights when the fog seals the world shut. I knew the road by heart anyway. Sharp left after the old iron bridge that groans when you cross it, long sweeping right past the abandoned church with the steeple leaning like it's tired, then a straight run along the river before the climb out toward Irwin. I drove by memory more than sight, hands easy on the wheel, telling myself it was just another foggy night in the mountains. Happens every fall when the water cools faster than the air. Nothing to worry about if you take it slow. That's when I heard the first knocks. 3 sharp raps on the trailer side, metal on metal, loud enough to cut through the engine noise and the hiss of tires on wet asphalt, clear as a hammer on an anvil. I figured a rock kicked up from the front tire, or maybe a branch hanging low that the trailer caught as I rolled under. Happens sometimes on those back roads where the trees crowd in. I eased off the gas a little, listening over the idle. Nothing more came, just the trailer settling on its springs, and the fog pressing in closer like it was leaning over the hood to watch. I rolled on slow, eyes straining ahead for the next curve, telling myself it was nothing. Old trailers make all kinds of noises when they're empty. Chains shifting, landing gear rattling loose, the frame flexing over bumps. I'd heard worse. A minute later it came again. 3 knocks, same rhythm, but farther back now, toward the rear of the trailer. Deliberate, not random. I frowned, checked the side mirrors. Nothing but white glow and the faint red of my taillights bleeding into the mist. No branches close enough to reach that far back. The road was clear along there. I told myself it was the mud flap slapping, or maybe a loose tie-down chain I'd missed when I swept the deck.
Still, the skin on my neck prickled the way it does when you feel eyes on you in a dark parking lot. I turned the radio up a little. Some late-night preacher out of Bristol droning about salvation and the wages of sin, just to have another human voice in the cab, even if it was one I didn't much care for. The knocks moved again, this time from underneath. Slow, deliberate. Tap, 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 like someone testing the metal with their knuckles, feeling along the frame rails from the inside out. My stomach dropped cold. I downshifted hard, let the Jake brake growl low to cover the sound, and started looking for a place to pull over. There's a wide spot about halfway through the hollow, an old gravel turnout where folks used to park to fish the river before the floods in '78 washed half the bank away and took the good holes with it. Fishermen still stop there sometimes, but not many. I spotted the reflectors through the fog, 2 little orange eyes winking back, and eased the rig over, tires crunching loud as I stopped on the soft gravel. Set the brakes with a hiss, left the engine idling so the lights stayed on and the batteries didn't drain, and sat a moment listening with my hands still on the wheel. Silence. Thick, wet silence that felt heavier than noise. The fog muffled everything, the river's voice, the wind moving high in the treetops, even the tick of the cooling engine. It was like the world had been wrapped in cotton. I grabbed the big mag light from under the seat, the heavy aluminum one with fresh batteries that throws a beam bright enough to blind a deer, and climbed down from the cab. The cold hit me right away, damp air soaking through my flannel jacket and raising gooseflesh on my arms. My boots sank slightly in the soft gravel, making a sucking sound with each step. The fog swirled around the headlights, turning the turnout into an island of pale light floating in nothing. I walked the length of the driver's side first, beam sweeping slow under the trailer, over the dual tires caked with red clay, along the frame rails and cross members. Nothing out of place. No branches caught underneath, no rocks stuck in the treads, no fresh scratches on the paint, just wet metal glistening and the smell of river mud mixed with diesel exhaust hanging low. The underside was clean enough, nothing dangling, no chains loose. I even kicked the tires once, listening for the thud, making sure nothing was wrong with the rigging. All good. I was starting back toward the cab, telling myself it was just the hollow playing tricks, echoes off the ridges, temperature changes making metal pop, when the knocks came again. From the rear corner, same 3 raps, patient as a woodpecker. I froze mid-step. The sound was too clear, too intentional. Not wind, not shifting cargo, there was no cargo. Someone, or something, was back there, close enough to reach out and touch the trailer. I called out, voice cracking a little more than I'd admit to anyone. "Hey, anybody need help? You hurt or something?" Only the fog answered, swirling thicker around the headlights like it was trying to hide what made the noise. I walked to the back slow, light shaking in my grip despite trying to hold it steady, beam cutting a narrow tunnel through the white. The trailer doors were secure, chains tight and padlocked just like I'd left them. Underneath, nothing I could see at first, just shadows and dripping condensation beating on the brake lines. Then it came from directly beneath where I stood, slow taps moving along the undercarriage, following my steps like they knew exactly where I was standing above. Tap, 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 closer each time, patient, almost curious. My heart started pounding hard enough I could feel it in my throat and hear it in my ears over the idle. I crouched down, knees popping loud in the quiet, and shone the light full under the trailer from the rear. The beam caught mud and axle grease, spiderwebs thick with dew clinging to the leaf springs, and then eyes. Human eyes, wide and unblinking, staring back at me from no more than 5 feet away. A face pressed close to the ground, filthy, hair matted across the forehead in wet strings, skin pale and streaked with dirt like it hadn't seen sun in years. It was under there with me, belly flat to the gravel, watching quiet. The eyes didn't reflect the light like an animal's would. They just looked, dark and steady, curious maybe, or hungry in a way that had nothing to do with food. I jerked back hard, breath catching sharp in my chest like I'd been gut-punched. The face tilted slightly, following the movement of the light, and the mouth, Lord, the mouth, moved just a fraction, not quite a smile. Then it knocked once more, right on the frame above its head, slow and deliberate, like saying hello, or maybe come closer. I scrambled up, flashlight beam swinging wild across the gravel and into the weeds. Something moved fast on the opposite side, scuttling low, quick as a possum, but bigger, heavier. I ran around the rear of the trailer, boots slipping on wet gravel, light slicing frantic through the fog. Caught just a glimpse as it cleared the passenger side, a figure crawling out from under on all fours, thin limbs bent wrong, bare back streaked with mud and old scratches, hair hanging long and dark and tangled with leaves. Skinny but wiry, like someone who'd lived hard and lean. It didn't stand right away, just scuttled forward into the tall weeds at the edge of the turnout and vanished into the white, moving smoother than any person ought to on hands and knees. I didn't wait to see if it would come back or if there were others. Bolted for the cab, yanked the door open with fingers that felt thick and clumsy, climbed in and slammed it shut behind me. Locked both doors fast, hands shaking so bad I dropped the flashlight on the floorboard where it rolled under the seat. Sat there breathing hard, chest heaving, staring out into the fog that pressed against the windshield like it wanted inside. The headlights showed nothing but empty gravel and swirling mist, the river just a darker shape beyond. I told myself it was a transient, some homeless fella hiding from the weather or the law. Maybe one of those folks who slip off the grid and live back in the laurel hells, eating what they trap and staying out of sight. But transients don't crawl under moving trailers doing 40 miles an hour. They don't knock like that, patient and playful, and they sure as hell don't look at you with eyes that don't blink. I released the brakes with a hiss and eased forward, not fast, couldn't see 10 feet ahead anyway, but steady, wanting distance more than speed. The fog was thicker now, pressing against the glass, beating on the wipers even though I hadn't turned them on. I'd gone maybe 50 yards, tires just starting to hum again on the asphalt when the knock started up once more. Soft at first, pacing alongside the trailer in the ditch. Tap, tap, tap.
then harder, moving from rear to front as I rolled, like fingers walking the length of the metal. Whatever it was keeping up easy, running or crawling alongside in the fog, hidden by the white, tapping the side like it was checking if I was still there, still listening. I sped up a little, shifting up through the gears till I was doing 30, then 35 where I could feel the straight stretches. The knocks kept perfect pace, moving along the length of the trailer in rhythm with my speed. Sometimes they'd stop for a few seconds when I slowed for a curve, then start again farther ahead like it was cutting across the inside of the bend through the weeds to stay with me. My mouth went dry like cotton. I tried the CB again, keying the mic hard. Breaker, breaker, anybody copying on 19, got a situation down in the Nollychucky Hollow, need a bear report or just a voice, but only static hissed back, loud and empty, like the mountains themselves were holding their breath. The hollow seemed endless that night, longer than the 8 miles I knew it to be. Every curve felt the same as the last, every straight stretch stretched farther than memory. The knocks never nev up for more than a minute at a time. Sometimes they came from underneath again, slow and heavy, like weight dragging along the frame rails, fingernails perhaps, or knuckles raw from gravel. Other times from the side, sharp and quick, almost eager. Once I swear I heard a low grunt carried on the damp air through my cracked window. Just a huff of breath, almost a laugh, like whatever was out there found the whole thing amusing. I rolled the window up tight after that and turned the heater on high even though I was sweating under my jacket. It went on like that for miles that felt like 20. Knocks pacing me, stopping when I slowed for the sharper curves, starting again when I accelerated through the gentler ones. I caught glimpses sometimes in the side mirror when the fog parted just right. Movement low to the ground along the shoulder, a pale shape darting between the mist and the tree line, keeping even with the trailer like it was tied to it. Never clear enough to swear in court what I saw, but enough to know I wasn't alone anymore, that something had latched hard and wasn't ready to let go. Finally, the road began to climb out of the river bottom. I felt it in the engine note first, the deeper growl as it pulled harder, the way the trailer settled back lighter on the fifth wheel as we left the damp behind. The fog thinned